and say, great, just like I did. Sanford, you're my ticket. I want to hang with you. Teach me. And by the way, what you told me to do last week, that didn't quite work. Can you give me a couple new things to work on? Right? And I began to see, I don't think this is a sustaining proposition of partnership with being able, particularly in a leadership realm, to be able to sort of create inclusive organizations. So that led me back to Spokane in '96, saying I need to try this experiment. A couple of hands of the guys that were in that room with me at the time. I think there's 3 or 4 of them here, right? So that was a pretty amazing 3 hours. And I came out, I don't know what it was like for the 4 of you, but I came out of it saying, man, I feel like I took my little fingernail, I just scraped some ice off the windshield of my own soul, and it was a lot of hard working. And I have a little window in what's going on there, but it's still not really clear. And I really got convinced saying, I need more than 3 hours. So I really went right back to the drawing board, and over the winter of '96, '97, I said, I need to sort of put together a 3.5-day residential learning experience just for white men. To be able to debunk the myth, number one, that we don't know anything about this topic, and secondly, we are dependent on people that are not of our group for our learning, because that's not a sustainable proposition. And thanks. And in March of '97, so you can imagine, still, and we called it a white men's caucus. That was intentional. Certainly was not for marketing purposes. Right? So I put this thing out to my client group, which was still fairly small, and I was very selective because I was still really nervous about the history of our group and what gets read into that and what we must be doing. And it's really that's valid stuff, right? But I said, I got to do this. And I had 13 guys show up in March, and some of those guys are again also here and are still here with me. And one of the guys that showed up was my father. And that was an interesting one because I really wanted him to be there, but in a part of that, without going into family stuff, that was and I know there's people who could help me with this, and we can see ourselves happening. We brokered that conversation through my mother, at least that request. Anyway, my dad showed up, and because part of the reason I said, if I'm going to work with my group from a place of facilitation, I got to bring something to the table, because if I don't, why would they? So I said, I'll get my dad there. It'll get me engaged with my stuff. And certainly it did. It certainly did. And here was that group. Some of us a little younger, a little thinner. And it was phenomenal. But it really was just the beginning. And from that point, and again, this is coming back to this relationship with Harrison, where this comes from. From that point, I said, we need to do more of this. And so, in 1997, until now, we're a company that is not just working with white men, but we've dedicated ourselves to work with leaders to create sustainable, inclusive cultures in a world that I feel is in deep need. And it's not just working with white men, because the other interesting thing is I have done more of my work with my group. It has fundamentally changed how I come to partnership across lots of difference, whether it's skin color or gender or sexual orientation. And so, hence, when I first met Harrison at Port Townsend in '87, and I was just dawning on the fact that I had stepped into a parallel universe with looking at privilege and group identity and not having a clue and being sort of like, you know, adrift or standing on something that wasn't firm ground. I now know that I stand on firm ground. And I like to say I'm more confused now in 2015 about many of these issues than I was in 1996 or even 1987. And what's changed for me is using my confusion to really drive back to Kurt Hahn, my what? My curiosity. So I'm noticing when I'm confused or overwhelmed or uncomfortable, that's data for me to say, what is behind that? What's the learning? What's the potential for the relationship, the partnership, not just with the other, but with myself? And so that's really that journey piece, right? So historically, coming back to this, coming back to the name of our firm, we get this all the time. It's like, why do we got to talk about white guys? We actually, in the last 20 years, a number of us have attempted to work with companies and starting employee resource groups and helping them trying to start a white men's ERG, employee resource group, which is a daunting proposition because the common knowledge on the street in many organizations is, pardon my language, but what the hell are the white guys in an ERG when every day at work is a white men's ERG? And my experience is that our group, sometimes we're like fish in water. We're the last to know, number one, that we have a group, we have a culture, we have an identity, and back to Harrison, I can see it in others, and I just sort of want to hang out in their space as opposed to explore my own. Or worse, what stops us, what goes unexamined, is what does it mean to be white, male, or heterosexual, even to the point of white is not a race. I think male is not a gender, and heterosexual is not a sexual orientation. So in the sense of looking at my own identity and understanding Bill as a part of the white group, as a part of the male group, as the part of the heterosexual group, and the list could go on down, what I have found is I start to understand how I am both similar and different to every other person on the planet, including other straight white guys, because no two of us are identical. Right? So you might be, given that I just turned 60, you might be saying to yourself, well, that's really interesting, Bill, but you know, that's just a phenomena of you white guy boomers, because it's different for us millennials. And it is, absolutely. And my experience, and actually there's research, thank you Denise and others for that bear out that this issue is not going away, and actually there's a lot of research around equity issues that are showing that the issues are actually gaining strength and not in the right direction, I might add. So I want to just show a short little clip out of a tremendous film that Jim Morris and his partner Mo Carrick are bringing to Bend in the next couple of months, that's going circling around the country. It's been out now, what, Jim, for 6-9 months, it's been released. It's by the Misrepresentation Group out of San Francisco. And this is the one that they just did that you might have seen, called The Mask That You Live In. And it's about young boys and men. And I just want to show these 4 minutes